mad, isn't it? Hello. Hello. Hello, my name's Charlie. I'm from the Way Biblical Fellowship. And today's Torah portion is Vayetzei. It's all about Jacob and Laban, and we actually went into some strange topics, talking about genetics of all strange things. Even talked about the stone that the Queen's coronated on. But we had a look at the fact that Jacob, this is Andy went out, and Jacob departed from much more than just places, and we watch him grow as a person. I hope you find it interesting. Thank you. Vayetzei, and he went out. For people who watch this, I'm going to have to explain, aren't I? People who watch this online, I'm just like this because it's freezing cold. And if you could see what I can see, there's blankets and all kinds, but we will carry on regardless. Okay. Oh, I've got to switch that on, that helps. Oh, there we go. Right. Proverbs 17:3 says this. It says, "The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but Yehovah tests the hearts." This week, Yehovah will process Yaakov through a series of very difficult life experiences, especially designed to remove his many impurities and prepare him to be the carrier of the glory that he was created to be. So you can ask yourself, is Yehovah refining you? Are you having your faith tested? Is Yehovah in the process of bringing you to the surface, removing all the impurities that are in your heart? Certain things in your life going on that are just, and you have to deal with this nonsense that's in there. And the Lord's just bringing situations to bring all this to your attention because it needs to be dealt with. 1 Peter 1:6-7 says this, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Yeshua HaMashiach." Okay, so Vayetzei, the essence of this verb is to move on, to leave that which is familiar, to depart on a journey of destiny, to embark upon a new adventure and to strike out in search of a new phase in life. This week's parsha begins with Yaakov making a dramatic departure from his father, his mother, his brother, his home, and from everything else he knows of life. Departing is something with which we must all come to grips. It means leaving something behind, at least temporarily, to go where destiny calls us. If you have not had to do that yet, I assure you that you will. Now, Rabbi Rachman of Breslov likened this world to a very narrow bridge, meaning that life is a series of dangerous crossings. Perhaps his most famous declaration is, "The whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the most important thing is to not be afraid." Imagine, therefore, that a suspension bridge swings between where you are now and where Yehovah would have you to be. The prospect of departing across that bridge creates emotions ranging from apprehension to terror, but we must cross over in spite of our fear. For if we settle for where we are, when Yehovah would have us to go somewhere else, we deprive our lives of meaning. So let's ask ourselves, where's Jacob when this parsha begins? His whole life's a complete mess. He's a mess. He is not, as we begin this week's parsha, looking for a relationship with Yehovah, whom he calls, when he's speaking to Isaac, he calls him your God, so he doesn't even call Yehovah his own God. He's a fugitive aspiring only to escape the wrath of Esau, so he's basically terrified and legging it. He's trying to soothe his own feelings of guilt by finding a wife from his mother's family in Haran. Yaakov is actually retracing the steps of Abraham's servant, who many years earlier had taken all of Abraham's wealth as he set out on a mission to find a wife for Yitzhak. But in contrast, Yaakov leaves with absolutely nothing material to offer his prospective wife and her family. So we can see there, can't we, that it never goes well when we operate under our own steam. The servant went out and it was all according to the Lord's plan. He went out with loads of wealth and it all went swimmingly cool. Yaakov tries to do things in his own strength, and as a result he ends up making the same journey, but he's running terrified with absolutely nothing. He leaves only with his blessing and his birthright, but with nothing tangible to show for them. Imagine how you would feel. You are the chosen son, blessed with the promise of the land of Canaan, yet it is your rival brother who remains in the land. You must have been thinking, wow, this has all gone terribly, terribly wrong. What's happened here? Furthermore, when Ishmael was rejected from the birthright process, he was sent away to the east, and now Jacob is being sent away to the east. He must have been confused, mustn't he, thinking, this is absolutely awful. I'm being sent away to the same place that Ishmael was sent away. It's like everything that I'd hoped for is just being taken from me. Genesis 25:6. But Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, and while he was still living, he sent them eastward, away from Isaac his son, to the country of the east. So he's thinking, why am I being sent to the same place? He's not in a happy place in himself. And I put that because I've got a friend called Tony Trumpet who always says to me, how are you, Charles? How are you? I say fine, but how are you in yourself, Charles? It just tickles me. But Jacob is not happy in himself. Not in himself. Okay, so deceit is not going to reap great rewards. He feels a bit lost and he needs reassurance. I thought he was young till JP said he was 70 last week. 70 when all this went on. Should have known better, shouldn't he? And there he is. That's a picture of him there. looking like he needs reassurance. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, we will see Yahovah use the combination of God encounters and God-ordained life experiences to mold Yaakov into a man who would trust him totally, who would shema his words wholeheartedly, and he would both walk in and teach his household his ways. We need to learn from his story. I've got a picture of Charlie Chaplin there as well, because he looks like he needs a bit of reassurance and a bit of love, doesn't he? But we need to learn from this story. All the stories are in the scripture, so that we read them and go, don't want to be making them mistakes. So he's about to have a spiritual experience. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, going, woo! But I did. He's going to have a spiritual experience. Okay, but we have an idea of what a spiritual experience is, because we're Greek. We think it's all ethereal and all this, but it's a real experience. Bill Bullock Sr. says this: the spiritual realm is not some mystic form of nirvana where super spiritual people have ecstatic out-of-body experiences and escape reality. The spiritual realm is not a different place from our world at all. Hence, throughout the experience, Jacob's head will rest on a real rock on a real hill, even as angels ascend and descend in plain view. It is in fact essential to man's purpose in creation that we not be transported out of the physical realm to the spiritual realm. Our purpose is to bring the personhood of God and the supernatural truths of the spiritual realm into the physical realm. See, we have this idea as Greeks that the spiritual realm is this like airy-fairy etherland drifting around in the woolly clouds somewhere. But that's not the way it is. And the Lord deals with us in all the different ways, physically, spiritually, but they're all, with all these things together, it's not like we have to leave our bodies behind to suddenly become spiritual. Now, Genesis 28:10, this is the beginning of the portion. It says, and Yaakov went out from Beersheba and he went towards Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place, and he tarried there all night because the sun was set, and he took of the stones of that place, and he put them for his pillows and lay down in that place, making a big deal of that place. We know what that place is because there's no other place called that place. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending upon it. It's what's known as Jacob's ladder here. Rick Spurlock says this: the road that Jacob took from Beersheba was not the easy way to Haran. The easy way was the King's Highway that follows the Jordan River Valley. Instead, Jacob took the ridge road that follows the ridge of hills that make up the center of the land of Israel. In the center of that ridge was the town of Shalem, or Jebu, which is Jerusalem. And very close to that was the town that is identified as Bet-El, or Bethel. The ancient sages identify Bethel not with the later Bethel in the time of the judges and the kings, but with Araunah, the Jebusite's threshing floor, which Jacob's descendant, King David, purchased for the purpose of building a temple. If this is true, Jacob's first encounter with the God of Abraham and Isaac was on the site of Abraham and Isaac's greatest test, this, where he's told to offer his son on the mountains of Moriah, and the place where Yeshua was actually crucified as well. It's also the place where the temple was built. All this is happening in this place. Jacob hasn't got a clue. He's just made some stones and laid down his head, but it's in this place. Therefore, assuming this is the same location, the stone that Jacob used as a pillow may have been from the very altar on which Isaac was nearly offered up on. Jacob is walking in the footsteps of his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham as he establishes his own identity. His walk begins at the place of sacrifice. This is the point at which it all starts to become real for Jacob, and it all happens in this significant place. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? And I've just asked this question: what does all this have to do with the Queen's coronation? What? A while back, I started looking at stuff, and it was all to do with, bizarrely enough, it was to do with the history of America. And I got to learn certain things about history, things that are a little bit bizarre. So well, I want to have a look at them. But this thing about the Queen being coronated, let's have a look at that. Have you heard of the Stone of Scone? No. Jacob Spilett, or the Stone of Destiny. Right, this is the Stone of Destiny underneath this chair here. Traditionally, it is said to be the pillow stone used by the biblical Jacob. According to one legend, it was the coronation stone of the early Dalriada Scots when they lived in Ireland, which they brought with them when invading Caledonia. Another legend holds that the stone was actually the travelling altar used by St. Columba in his missionary activities throughout what is now Scotland. It's a stone that was robbed from the Scottish, and now all the kings and queens are actually coronated on it, and it is believed to be Jacob's pillar. It's believed to be, they call it the Stone of Scone, or the Stone of Destiny. It's really bizarre, isn't it? Certainly since the time of Kenneth MacAlpin. Was he the builder? That was that MacAlpine that was with him. At around 847, Scottish kings were seated upon the stone during their coronation ceremony. In 1296, the stone was captured by Edward I. I think he was the Hammer of the Scots, as spoils of war, and taken to Westminster Abbey, where it was fitted into the old wooden chair known as St. Edward's chair, on which English sovereigns were crowned. This is the stone here. Okay, it's believed to be, I'm not saying it is, please believe I'm not saying it is, but they believe it to be this stone. Now, as part of the peace treaty between Scotland and England in 1328, known as the Treaty of Northampton, Edward III agreed to return the captured stone to Scotland, but it still remained in England for another 6 centuries. Yeah, we'll give it back to you. Oh yeah, just haven't got round to it yet. And in 1996, and this is the event actually taking place here, with all the craziness that goes with it, the British government decided that the stone should be kept in Scotland when not in use at coronations. And on November the 15th, 1996, after a handover ceremony at the border between representatives of the Home Office and of the Scottish Office, it was returned to Scotland and transported to Edinburgh Castle, where it remains. Hurrah! Said all the Scottish people. Okay, I believe these, you know, the things that the judges wear, I believe they're related to the things that the pharaohs used to wear. Some crazy stuff on the internet, isn't it? And Britain means land of the covenant, and British means covenant man. Right. There is a question though, was it the real stone that was returned? There have been doubts over the stone's authenticity ever since the Hammer of the Scots carried it off as war booty. Some historians claim that by a cunning sleight of hand, the Scots actually handed Edward the cesspit cover from the Scone Castle rather than the real stone, which if true means that a long succession of English and British monarchs have been crowned while atop a medieval toilet seat lid. Oh, it riles me to think of it. And this picture is further blurred by the fact that on Christmas Day in 1950, 4 nationalist students stole the stone from Westminster Abbey and drove it north. They made a film about it, I think, called The Stone of Destiny. Okay, it resurfaced some 4 months later following a huge public outcry. A huge public outcry. I can't believe they took this stone, having been deposited by the thieves in Arbroath Abbey, draped in a saltire. The rumour mill was quickly in action and suggested that the recovered stone, now safely restored beneath the coronation throne at Westminster, was in fact a copy. I can't believe it. How can we possibly know if it's the real stone that Jacob laid his head upon? Okay, now, this idea of this stone, see, what I want to get across to you is this whole story of Jacob's ladder has so gripped the occultic world that they just can't get enough of it. And there's so much that goes around all this business about the stone that they just really can't get enough of it. I've got here the master apartments, which apparently is another home of Jacob's pillar. Apparently, see the cornerstone there, laid in 1929. In that is a casket which contains all kinds of bizarre things, including Jacob's pillar. This is the actual building, which was built as a museum for a guy called Nicholas Roerich. But we'll have a quick look at that. This is Nicholas Roerich here, sculptured at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles. He's heavily linked with the Theosophical Society, these strange folk. Now, Louis Buff Parry links the cornerstone of the Master Apartments, a tower in New York City, originally designed in the 20s to include a rooftop stupa, which is a shrine of Buddhist relics, to the activities of Jesuits and the Grail. He claims a secretive society smuggled Jacob's pillar stone, the anthropomorphic icon stolen by Rachel, or some other Grail correlative, I can't even read, out of France and England and into Canada in the 1740s. So they even believe that part of the rest of the parsha that we read, where Rachel steals some household gods, were all in this casket, that this strange mystic character somehow managed to get a hold of and placed in the care of this building, which is linked with the Jesuits. I also heard that this idea of the Holy Grail, there's all kinds of ideas what that is as well, but we'll save that. A related enigmatic vessel of interest to the modern Jesuits was supposedly hidden in the cornerstone of the Master Apartments. The building featured a museum dedicated to the work of Nicholas Roerich, a Russian mystic, artist, and public figure associated with Annie Besant's Theosophical Society. He actually advised H. Wallace and Franklin Roosevelt on the design of the back of the dollar bill. He was really well connected and really well funded. Apparently he was quite wealthy in his own right, but he was given lots of money to continue in all. He used to travel to Tibet and all kinds of different places. The building's Masonic superintendent, whose last meeting was with the officers of the Jesuit order, was murdered in the basement near the black stone supposedly housing the Grail. Okay. This apparently is another place where this pillar stone of Jacob lays. Some of the craziness surrounding Jacob's ladder. Okay. What some believe to be the Grail. I'm just saying this is what some people believe. When Adam and Eve were exiled from paradise, they were given a gift from the angel Raziel, a stone glowing with the light of the first day. And they say that Jacob was wearing this marvelous gem when he dreams of a ziggurat or a ladder to heaven. And some people believe that that was what was in this casket that this man placed in the cornerstone of this Masonic building. By the way, when this cornerstone of this building was laid, leaders from all over the world met for this cornerstone to be laid. It's like a really big deal. So what I want us to get in our heads is this whole, you can read, Jacob put his head down and there was a ladder, and we just read it and skip on to the next bit. But this is being a really big deal to a lot of people in these secret societies who definitely take all this extremely seriously. As you know about the dollar bill, I'm quite sure. The cornerstone contains a 400-year-old casket from the Rapchit dynasty of northern India, made of iron with inlays of gold and silver. The casket contains photographs taken during the Roerich's expedition to Central Asia. It is also said to contain Jacob's pillow, or the stone of Scone. And prominent politicians participated in the cornerstone laying ceremony, and among messages read from the prominent Americans was a letter from Albert Einstein, which he praised the cultural goals of the building's directors. This was a building to promote the Theosophical Society, which is, bizarrely enough, the same bunch of people who've influenced the United Nations and basically direct policy. They affect education as well. It's the same people. We've got Madame Blavatsky, her name's Alice A. Bailey. All these people, these are all Theosophical Society members. So as you can see, there is a great deal of interest with regards to this biblical account, especially from the world of the occult. Another thing that I found, which is quite bizarre, is that just to link the Jesuits who were linked with this building and the Masonic people, and also with the Jewish mystics, is that the Grail is actually believed to be the highest Kabbalic secret, which is written down in some kind of a code, which they believe is in this casket as well. Some people actually believe it's a rock that fell from Sirius, is in the casket. It's really bizarre. And as I say, all the world leaders were there thinking, wow, because this was important to them. So it says, and he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending upon it. The word for ladder here is kulam, which is probably better translated as staircase or stairway. So what he actually got was a stairway to heaven. Have you ever heard that expression before? Yeah, one of the most popular of all tunes of all time, which, if you actually find out, Robert Plant believed to actually channel the lyrics. And so in the spelling there is a letter, and there's backwards messages in it, which it's almost impossible to do. 23 letters going forward, which have a meaning that when you play it backwards, actually has a meaning that actually relates to it going forwards. It's impossible to do. But anyway, in the spelling there is a letter missing, the letter Vav, which speaks of connecting, suggesting that the staircase is incomplete somehow. And this is a staircase, remember, that connected heaven and earth. And there's a Vav missing. So it's an incomplete staircase, and the Vav represents connection. So it's like there's a connection broken between heaven and earth. Now, some have likened the staircase or ladder to a genetic strands as pictured below. Okay, because if it was a staircase, it would look pretty much like this, especially if it was a spiral staircase. Now, this is something that I found quite bizarre. This is to do with genetics. How many strands? Currently, there are 2 strands of DNA. We've got strands, haven't we? 2 strands of DNA that each molecule has that are visible. Incredibly, there are many geneticists that believe that there are 10 hidden strands within the DNA molecule. Now, please note the numbers 2 and 10. Now, just put your head in this frame of mind. If 2 represents anything, biblically, it could be seen to represent the 2 tribes of the house of Judah, and the 10 could be seen to represent the 10 tribes of the house of Israel. Okay, now we're talking about scientists who are saying this. There's 2 strands, and they believe that there should be another 10. So if this is a staircase, and we've only got 2 at the minute, that definitely is an incomplete staircase, isn't it? So how many strands? The question is, how many DNA strands are human beings capable of possessing? Some geneticists are claiming humans will one day have 12 strands. That's like, wow, it's quite a big deal, isn't it? Some believe that before the fall, Adam had all 12 strands, that by attaining the gifts of the Ruach, we are repairing our DNA, and that the 10 missing strands represent the gifts and our return to full communion with Jehovah. When we fell, we lost something, didn't we? And the connection between heaven and earth was kind of like broken to us. So what people are suggesting is that when we come to the Lord and we commune with him and his Spirit starts to work in us, we're actually being rebuilt. And the gifts of the Spirit, they represent us becoming whole again. Shalom is all about being whole, isn't it? We've actually been broken and destroyed, and this is talking about becoming whole again. So where 10 can represent Ephraim, and Ephraim was known as the gift, believe it or not, it is claimed that the time when we were repaired, as it were, is when the 10 come back to join with the 2. Now, and he called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. So this place, right, where all this stuff has occurred, where Abraham has gone and he's tried to sacrifice Isaac, this place where he's laid his head, which is eventually going to be the place where they build the temple, used to be called Luz. So what was Luz? It actually means almond tree. Okay, now the menorah, which is here, because I want to just relate, what's this thing about an almond tree? The menorah has blossoms on it, and they are all almond blossoms. The sages call the menorah a tree of life. Now, when Aaron's rod budded, it was almond blossoms that came forth. So what's this whole thing with this almond blossom and this place being called almond tree? The Hebrew word for almond, by the way, is shakad or shakade. It is derived from a Hebrew verb root, which means to be watchful, to be on alert, to never slumber or sleep. This is the menorah in the temple, okay, with its almond blossoms on it. The menorah, these almond-shaped bearers of the oil for the light, teach us something about the nature of being a light bearer. That's what we're told to be, a light to the nations. We're to be watchful and alert as sons of the light. Okay. It's also believed that the tree of life in the Garden of Eden was an almond tree. And it kind of makes sense that if the menorah, which is a symbol that you used in the Mishkan, has actually got almond buds on it. If Aaron's staff, which ended up in the Ark of the Covenant, actually budded almonds, and the tree of life was supposed to be an almond tree, and this place where all this stuff used to happen was called Almond Tree. What's it suggesting? Could this place that used to be known as Luz, the place where Abraham offered up Isaac, the place where the temple would be built, and the place where our Messiah died for us, could it be the place where the almond tree, the tree of life, used to be? Could it actually be the place? Because we've talked before, haven't we, about the fact that the land of Israel, the promised land, could well be the Garden of Eden, because it's all, the stories is all about, they got kicked out of the garden. And they went back to then they get kicked out of the garden again, and he's bringing them back to the garden, like in a cycle. So could this place that was called Luz, or the almond tree, actually be as well the place where the tree of life once stood? I don't know, but things like this interest me, see, so I have to go into it. Now, chapter 29. Then Yaakov went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in this field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. Keep in mind there was 3 flocks of sheep. And thither were all the flocks gathered. And they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. And Yaakov said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. Okay. Can we ask ourselves, is it the same well where in chapter 24 Abraham's servant met Rivkah, Yaakov's mother? And it could well be, couldn't it? There seems to be a lot of this thing going on around this well. Note, unlike Abraham's servant, Yaakov does not, upon arriving at the well, begin with prayer. He's not somebody who's used to walking with the Lord. He's only just come into this realization. Whereas the servant went, the first thing the servant did was pray. Yaakov, no. Now he's in Haran. Haran represents a place of compromise and of settling for less than one's destiny and purpose in life in favor of that which the world has to offer. If you remember, Abraham's father, Terah, was called to come, and he was told to go into the promised land. But actually what happened was, when he got to Haran, he actually thought, oh, you know what, I quite like it here. I think I'm going to stay. He'd been called from Ur of the Chaldees, and he was comfy there, and he got to Haran, and he just couldn't go that extra step further. Abraham, on the other hand, was told, leave behind all the lies of your fathers and continue. So it's a place of compromise. And you can ask yourself this, are you living at the place, physically or spiritually, to which Jehovah has called you? Have you gone the full distance, or have you settled for compromise? Do you find yourself sojourning in Haran, this place of compromise, or settling for less than God's best for you? Because that's what Abraham's father did. We've got to be more like Abraham and continue. Verse 5, and he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well, and behold, Rachel his daughter comes with the sheep. Now, when the servants of Abraham had a similar revelation at the well of Haran, when he'd found, oh yeah, I found Abraham's descendants. What did he do? He bowed his head and he worshipped Jehovah. Did Jacob? No, I'm afraid he did nothing of the sort. He arrogantly told the shepherds how to go about their business. Completely different kettle of fish. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep and go and feed them. Who is he? He's telling these people who are shepherds how to do their job. The servant, when he came and he had the revelation, the Lord's favoured me, he bowed and he worshipped. Jacob's like that, you don't want to be doing it like that. They must have got a bit riled. And they said unto him, We can't, until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. Remember, it mentioned 3 flocks. There's believed to be 3 flocks. There's the house of Israel, the house of Judah, and the nations, the people that are in the nations. And there's this interesting thing, isn't it? So they can't water the sheep till they're all gathered together, i.e. the house of Israel, the house of Judah, and those who are grafted in from the nations. Notice it says, roll the stone from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Now, that just paints the picture there of the stone being rolled away from the tomb and Yeshua coming out. And what did Yeshua say? He said, anybody who's thirsty, come to me. So again, Haben and Haben, stone and son. Now in the last day, the great day of the feast, Yeshua stood and he cried, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believes on me, as the scripture had said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Is this what it's on about when it says he'd roll the stone away and then you'll be able to feed the sheep, water the sheep? Revelation 21:6, and he said unto me, it is done, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. So is this saying that it is only when all these sheep are gathered, that is the house of Israel, the house of Judah, and those grafted in from the nations, that we will drink freely from the waters of life as made possible when the stone was rolled away and Yeshua rose from the dead, thus allowing the house of Israel to return to covenant and for Jehovah's people to be a light to the Gentiles and the nations. Now verse 9 says this, and while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. He's a bit nuts, isn't he? He comes along and he tells all these shepherds what they should be doing. Then he sees this, he's 70 as well. I reckon he's never been around women much or something. He sees this woman and he fancies her, and he just can't control him. He legs it over and starts lifting this heavy rock up that supposedly takes 3 people, trying to impress her desperately. She's probably looking at him thinking, what the heck is he doing? It gets worse as well. So perhaps Yaakov was also foreshadowing what his descendants would experience in connection with the Exodus and the wilderness wanderings when Moshe actually brings forth water from a rock. You know, when he hit the rock. Now, I think I always put this picture on when we mention it, because I think it's amazing that actually could be the rock. Because the corrosion lines in the center of that rock all are water erosion lines. And there's only half an inch of water falls in that place every decade. So how would that be possible unless it possibly is the actual stone? Now, previously Rivkah had come forth in humility and watered Abraham's camels for his servant without being asked. That's how it happened previously at the well. She came and did all the watering and all this. But now Jacob steps forth in prideful arrogance and waters Laban's sheep for Rachel, and he didn't even get asked. Then Jacob followed up his display of worldliness with an outburst of outrageous and absolutely absurd behavior. So we think it's bad enough already he's trying to be Mr. Muscle Man. It gets worse. And put yourself in the mindset of the people of the day. And Jacob kissed Rachel. This is insane. And he lifted up his voice and he wept. So he turns into a complete emotional basket case. He kisses an unmarried woman, which is just, and then he's not betrothed to. That's just, what? And then he starts crying. Wow. So I'll put there, wow. Cool. He's really cool, isn't he? Now the Hebrew verb used is a form of the verb root nashach, which means to draw very close and kiss. So he really got hold of it. Wasn't a peck on the cheek either. Okay. The last time Yaakov kissed anyone, it was in Genesis 27:27. I put a picture there and I'm suggesting the fact that he's not good with women and he's a bit geeky, like, you know. 27:27, when he was dressed up in Esau's clothes was the last time he kissed someone, and in the course of calling his father out of the blessing of the firstborn, Yaakov had kissed his father in order to seal the deception. And here he is again, crying his eyes out. Verse 12, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father that she ran. This is loony. He just kissed me. Note that Jacob never once prays with regards to his selection of a wife. He just sees her, fancies her, and then that's it. We also notice something else in the order of their developing relationships. Like Isaac marries Rebekah, then he loves her. However, Jacob loves Rachel apparently from the moment he lays eyes on it, then he marries her. Isaac's order of marriage then love is probably not the advice that you'd give your son or daughter, but it does speak of the commitment to a spouse chosen by the Almighty versus a spouse chosen by attraction. Verse 13 says, "And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Yaakov his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him, and he kissed him, and he brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things." So I bet Laban was disappointed when he saw that it was only Jacob, no camels, no gifts for the family. Because when the servant came, he had loads of clobber, didn't he? Jacob's come completely skint. These events mark the beginning of over 20 years of Jacob's enslavement in Laban's house, and it all began appropriately enough with an embrace and a kiss. In Galatians 6:7, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that also he shall reap." He's about to reap what he sowed. And as we begin Parsha Vayetzei, Yaakov resembles his uncle Lavan much more than he resembles his father Yitzhak. And all that has to change. Yaakov has to be purged of the deceit and trickery which up to this point in life has defined his identity. We'll be finishing part 1 in a minute, but we'll just read a few more. "And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh, and he abode with him in the space of a month. And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favoured. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. So Torah does not record Laban's response to this proposition. It does not record the execution of any betrothal contract or the sealing of an agreement along the lines of what Yaakov proposed with either the shedding of blood or a covenant meal. Laban never committed to anything, but Yaakov apparently never noticed. He just jumped right in with both feet, and Laban let him. He's really dodgy character, Laban. He's like a car salesman, hence the picture. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days for the love he had to it. And Yaakov said to Laban, Give me my wife. Should have been more specific and said, Give me Rachel. And Laban takes advantage. For my days are fulfilled that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him. And he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah, his maid, for an handmaid. Hang on a minute, Leah? And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this that thou hast done to me? Did not I serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? And Laban said, It must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Whatever you sow, you reap. Just as he deceived his father, dressing up like his brother, he's been deceived as well. Jacob's deception was revisiting him. But as we measure it, it'll be measured to us. It says that in Mark 4:24. It will be measured to you with the same measure that you use. It also visits one of his offspring, Judah, later again, this deception. In Genesis 38, we have the story involving his daughter-in-law, Tamar, who disguises herself as a prostitute and tricks him. So this is something that happens. His deception has set up a cycle of events that's come back to haunt him. Okay, and I actually put this. Does it also come back to haunt Yaakov's descendants in the latter days? Does Esau, Edom, dress up as Jacob in order to steal back what Jacob used deceit to cheat him out of? Is this what we see happening? Because obviously what we've seen here is Jacob has been really deceitful. He's dressed up like his brother and stolen. Now, we've seen that these things create a pattern. Are we seeing in the last days that Esau is coming along, dressed up as Jacob, to steal what is rightfully Jacob's? I've put up this sign that Joe did a presentation on the other day, the Star of David. It actually comes from this shield here, which is the shield of the house of Rothschild. It's an occult symbol. If you're wondering who Rothschild is, the Balfour Declaration was actually made out to Lord Rothschild, which actually gave the Zionist movement their promise for Palestine. Okay. How about this for an end times prophecy? Is it telling us that people pretending to be Jacob's descendants will be operating in the last days? And if we read Revelation 8-10 from chapter 3, I know thy works, behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it, for thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Is this thing? These people who were dressed up, pretending to be Jacob. Behold, I will make them come and worship before thy feet, to know that I have loved thee. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation which shall come upon all the world, to try them that dwell upon the earth. This is talking about the last days. The hour of temptation that comes on all the world to try them that are on the earth. And it's talking about a bunch of people who say they are Jews and who are not. And I believe it's just this story. Again, Jacob's deception coming back to haunt him in the last times. Verse 27, we're nearly finished. Fulfill our week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. And he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Bill Bullock Sr. says this: the world in which we live is full to overflowing with beautiful girls, women, handsome boys and men, and crafty Lavans. They are a dime a dozen in our society. Take a walk in a shopping mall, check out the billboards in any city, turn on the television or radio, even for an advertisement or two, and you will see exactly what I mean. Please understand, it's all a test. The Holy One knows where you are. He knows what you see every day. He is allowing you to be tested to see if you will, like Yaakov in today's Aliyah, allow yourself to be distracted from your destiny by physical beauty and high-sounding but meaningless talk. Your destiny in the covenant is far too precious to throw it all away for either a pretty girl or guy or a smooth talker's line. Keep this principle in mind. What you see as important and valuable in life will determine whom you serve, the Holy One or Lavan. Now, a quick note about Leah. In Hebrew, Leah's eyes are described as being rachot, a term that can be translated as tender, soft or delicate, compassionate, gentle or mild. And the point is this: Leah's was a quiet, hidden inner beauty. By contrast, Rachel's beauty was external and to some degree, at least early in her life, superficial. But though Jacob may not love Leah the way he loves Rachel, the Holy One loves her more than Jacob ever could. How do I know? Because Leah's 3rd and 4th sons were Levi and Yehuda. From Levi will come the first deliverer, Moshe, and the fountain of all priests, Aaron. From Yehuda will come the first king to reign in Jerusalem, David, and the ultimate deliverer, Messiah himself. She was really well favoured. Unless you truly believe that Jacob loved only Rachel and not Leah. When Jacob was preparing to die, with which of these sisters, his 2 wives, did he request to be buried? Not with Rachel. She was buried on the road near Bethlehem. Instead, Jacob requested of Rachel's son, Joseph no less, to be buried with Leah in the cave of Machpelah. So Leah had a beauty which never faded, and the truth of the matter is that Jacob, upon his arrival at Haran, was simply too immature, too superficial, and too spiritually blind to see in Leah what Jehovah had deposited in her. He's a bit like a Kevin the teenager. Now Leviticus 18:18 says, "Neither shall thou take a wife to her sister to vex her, to uncover her nakedness beside the other in her lifetime." This is a law that is added because of transgression. Jehovah at no time told Yaakov to take more than 1 wife. His current situation is not the good and perfect will of his creator for him, or for Leah, for Rachel, for Bilhah, or for Zilpah. This is a dysfunctional and self-destructive compromise. Whenever we read Torah or Scripture in general, we must learn to clearly distinguish between narrative accounts of what imperfect human beings do on the one hand, and instructions from the Almighty on the other. Jehovah told us specifically what marriage is and how to approach it. Genesis 2:24, "For this reason a man is to leave his mother and father and is to cleave to his wife, and they are to become bachar echad, one flesh." One man with one woman is what Jehovah ordained. And if one's conscience is seared in sensuality enslaves one's will, one can even convince himself that he is actually genetically pre-programmed to prefer an other form of union. Of course, one can just as easily convince himself that he is genetically pre-programmed to be a sluggard, a murderer, a rapist, a child abuser, an alcoholic, or a drug addict. So, I was born this way. That's what some people say, isn't it? Okay, you could also say, I was born this way. I find women attractive. I'm predisposed to adultery. Is that right and acceptable? Any physical joinder of the human species other than what Jehovah ordained is at best a Haran-like compromise, a settling for something less than God's best, and at worst, the choice to make another kind of physical joinder is a deliberate self-deifying rebellion against Jehovah and a rejection of his plan for populating and redeeming the world. So we'll take a break and we'll come back. Jetzt can't even say it now, Vayetzei part 2. And everybody's got 2 blankets on now. It's bizarre. Okay, verse 31. And when Jehovah saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son. And she called his name Reuben, for she said, surely Jehovah had looked upon my affliction, and now therefore my husband will love me. She conceived again and bare a son, and said, because Jehovah hath heard I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she also called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. Now chapter 30. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger, who was in a bad foul mood, was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? So people are real, relationships are real, emotions are real, and to idealistically believe that people can live in close community and not become angry with one another from time to time is not real. Okay, the people in the scriptures, the real people. I like this one. Darling, please give me the I couldn't help but when I was looking to see someone, I just thought this was hilarious. Come on, darling, it was your idea to experiment in bed. I just think that's great. Very good. The dangerous one is not one who after sufficient prolonged provocation feels anger. Yeshua felt anger. The truly dangerous ones are those who either A, become physically threatening, or who, B, refuse to express his or her anger to the one with whom he or she is angry. Then they let the anger fester and talk viciously behind the back of the one with whom he or she is angry. That's not the way to do it. Responding to a flare-up of human anger by resorting to backbiting, complaining and spreading lashon hara, which is the evil tongue, to anyone who will listen is the biblical epitome of hate. It is the antithesis of love. That is nuts, isn't it? Have you read that? Immigration officer fired after putting his wife on the list of terrorists to stop her flying home. It's just outrageous, isn't it? Okay, immature people, I love this as well, got stuck in traffic, only yelled at 10 people. Immature people always struggle with anger. Mature people have learned the hard way that retribution and self-vindication are always destructive and never helpful. One of the critical tests of maturity is therefore how we deal with the human anger we experience. The biblical way to deal with anger is to take it to Jehovah immediately in prayer and exchange the anger one is feeling for Jehovah's emotions and attitudes of forgiveness, compassion, insight and wisdom. Then, after intercession, and not out of anger but out of compassion, it's time to engage the person with whom you were previously angry in a one-to-one conversation with the person who angered you, without a trace of yelling, name-calling, accusing or hurtful speech, much less intimidation or physical violence. Dealing with anger in this way is biblical proof of true love. Leviticus 19 says this, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbour, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbour as yourself. I am Jehovah. If you've got a problem with somebody, you have to go and speak to that person. You don't go and speak to everybody else about, you speak to that person, but you do it in love and you do it with the attitude of bringing reconciliation. Proverbs 27:5, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Psalm 141, let the righteous strike me, it shall be a kindness, and let him rebuke me, it shall be as excellent oil. Let my head not refuse it. We're supposed to build each other up. We're also supposed to, point to each other if we're in error, but we do it in love. From verse 3 to 21, what happens then? I'm just skipping through. We get the account of the births of Jacob's sons to Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali. Leah's handmaid Zilpah gives birth to Gad and Asher. Leah goes on to have a fifth and a sixth son, Issachar and Zebulun, and she already has Reuben, Simeon, Levi and Judah, and she also gives him a daughter, Dinah. And then verse 22 it says, and God remembered Rachel at last. She's seen all these kids come along. Now God remembers Rachel. God hearkened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bare a son and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. I was Joseph in the school play, you know. I'd sing all them songs and all that. And when the bit where they put him in the pit, I remember that, as I had to lie there, and all the kids around me playing the other brothers, and they all started kicking me, properly kicking me. I'm thinking, this is not acting, this is real, this is wrong. She called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Right, there's a wacky bit in there, in this whole bit, right, about Rachel asking for some of Leah's mandrakes. Leah says, yes, but only if I get to have Jacob tonight. And from that's when Issachar was conceived. It's just a bit of the wacky bit, you know, when it's talking about who gave birth to who. So I just think it's not, I used to think, this is why I looked into this, I used to think it was ducks. I thought mandrakes were ducks, but there you go. And I found out it's not a duck. It's a vegetable like this, but they're really, really wacky things. Now, that is nuts, isn't it? By pinching and tying mandrake roots as they grow, they can grow to look like human forms. That is nuts, isn't it? I just find things like this really fascinating. I've probably got a problem. Mandrakes grow in fields. It's small, yellow. It's not a duck. Yellow, tomato-like fruit that ripens in the spring. Chemical analysis shows it to contain narcotic substances, which explain its widespread medicinal uses in ancient times. Because the fruit exudes a distinctive and heady fragrance, folklore associates it with aphrodisiac powers. She probably said, give us some of that. I'll get Jacob to get all frisky with me. And she ends up going off with the other one, getting pregnant. Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, beauty and sex, was given the name the Lady of the Mandrake. The root of mandrakes, duodim, is dode, which means love or beloved. And both words are found in a verse in the Song of Solomon. In 7:13 it says, the mandrakes, duodim, give off a fragrance, and at our gates are pleasant fruits, all manner, new and old, which I have laid up for you, my beloved, dodai. Nutsy. Now here's what all the sons' names mean. This is from JP's notes last year. You can just read through them yourself. It's important, isn't it? There's like prophetic significance to what each person's name is. In verse 25, and it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. So at this point he's like that, look, I've served you, I just want to go. So Jacob's days in indentured servitude in his house are now accomplished. He's free at last. But the trouble is that Laban has made sure that Jacob owns absolutely nothing. If he leaves now, he will leave without a single morsel of food for the journey, much less a sense of capital with which to establish himself when he makes his return to Canaan. And that's not the way Jacob's grandfather Abraham left Haran, and it will not be the way Jacob will be leaving Haran either. He's got nothing. He's fair enough, he's got his wives now and he doesn't have to serve any more time for them, but he's got nothing. So Laban will resist Jacob's exodus and will refuse to let the people of the covenant go, just like Pharaoh a few centuries later will resist his descendants. There's so much in this story that's similar to when actually they left Egypt. It's bizarre, but we won't go into it this year. Jacob will not leave Haran empty-handed any more than his descendants will leave Egypt empty-handed. Do you remember what happened? Just crazy, isn't it? These Israelites, and they get all this plagues going on, and they actually leave. The Egyptians give them all the gold. The Lord places it on their hearts that they give them all the gold. So they leave with all this stuff. Verse 26, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favour in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. So the Labans of this world know all the tricks and pull out all the stops. Look at his tactics. He starts by laying on a guilt trip. Haven't I earned your friendship? Okay, and then he proceeds to claim to be special insight that God's will is for them to work together. So he's a bit slick, isn't he? And it says, and he said, appoint me thy wages and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude, and the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now when shall I provide for mine own house also? He needs, to stand on his own 2 feet. He said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all the flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteous answer for me in the time to come. When it shall come for my hire before thy face, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And he removed that day. This is nuts. So he's agreed to this whole thing of you can have all the spotted speckly ones and the brown sheep. And Laban gets all the rest. And Laban thinks this is a brilliant idea. And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. That's sneaky, isn't it? They're the very ones he's just promised to Jacob. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So his rotten dealings meant this. Jacob would start with absolutely nothing, and all them spotted, ring-streaked, off-coloured animals in the existing herds and flocks could not crossbreed now with the solid-coloured animals he left for Jacob to tend, making it almost impossible in the natural for Jacob to develop any significant flock or herd. Laban thought, in accordance with every principle of natural genetics that he knew, that he would thereby prevent Yaakov from getting any benefit whatsoever from his bargain. But he wasn't as smart as he thought. For a start, he didn't account for recessive genes. So what he's tried to do is make it almost impossible for Jacob, but Jacob's actually really quite a smart guy. He's either been led by the Lord, he's just got great experience from being a shepherd beforehand, but he's smart. Laban hasn't accounted for certain things, and there's a wacky bit coming up. Back to genes and stuff, see. Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled white streaks in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. So we basically made them like stripy. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters in the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they would conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth ring-streaked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and asses. So he became loaded, basically. Modern day equivalent. This is Jacob. He was loaded by what he's achieved. So what's all this about striped poles and all this caper? What's going on? What was it all about? Okay, there's a little bit of science, nothing too heavy. There is a great deal even today that scientists have not been able to work out concerning the transmission of hereditary factors. In a certain population, there are multitudes of different characteristics which may appear in different individual animals of that species. The variational potential in the DNA molecular structure is tremendous. Exactly what it is that determines the actual characteristics a particular individual or animal may have. Out of all the potential characteristics that are theoretically available in the gene pool is not yet known in any significant degree. It may be that Jacob had learned certain things about these animals which modern biologists have not yet even approached. There are indeed certain factors which can become prenatal influences and which can determine to some degree the physical characteristics of the progeny. Further, whether or not the sense of sight can actually mark the embryo in some way, there is no doubt that what one sees may have a strong effect on certain physiological mechanisms on his body. The phenomenon of blushing, the nauseous reactions produced by viewing gruesome sights, for example. So he forced the animals to come into contact with the striped rods by putting it in the drinking troughs. Stripes create a sense of apprehension and or fear in livestock animals. Cattle will not cross a road painted with a series of white stripes on asphalt, and sheep will buck entering an enclosed transport with sunlit slats. I made a terrible joke. Is this why sheep don't like going to the barbers? Because they have striped poles outside. That's terrible, isn't it? I apologise for that. The acute stress caused by an immediate spike in cortisol concentrations, which in turn spiked the LH-GnRH secretion, forcing ovulation in the ewes and the nannies, etc. Chronic cortisol concentrations are supposed to suppress LH, but short-term stress does just the opposite. The Hebrew word often translated mated or conceived, which occurs in front of the rods, is literally translated to make hot or heat up. So what occurred was forced ovulation. Jacob then placed these ewes in front of the herd, since grazing livestock predominantly face the same direction. So this is effectively saying that what he actually did was he forced these animals to ovulate, thereby increasing, the fact that they're going to have more and more offspring. Fact of the matter is that Jacob knew what he was doing. Now, this is bizarre. Now, epigenetics goes as far as to suggest that in changing the hormonal levels of the adults, the offspring could be genetically altered. Studies in epigenetics even show that diet and behavior have an effect genetically, in that they can switch on or off certain genetic markers. We were actually talking earlier about how you can change yourself with diet. I'm talking with Bobby. And your behavior and your diet can actually genetically alter you as a person. Now, epigenetic modulation can be affected by all of these things here. This is nuts, isn't it, to think that it actually affects you on a genetic level, all of these things. Lifestyle choices could affect gene sequences that code for cancer. Okay, there's a woman doctor speaking here. She says, many of my patients do not link this understanding with their risk or their children's risks of potentially enhancing their chances of developing a disease. But that is what is at stake when we consider that our lifestyles can independently impact gene expression. These changes that were incorporated into our DNA can too be passed on to future generations. So we can change our genetics by our behavior and by our diet, and that can actually affect our offspring as well. Postnatal and prenatal changes. Postnatal changes obviously before birth and after birth, and prenatal before. A Journal of the National Cancer Institute study published in June compiles the results from dozens of surveys and found that a sedentary lifestyle significantly increases the risks of developing some cancers. The study subjects who spent more time sitting during the day were 24% more likely to get colon cancer than those who spent the least amount of time in a chair. Those who watched the most television had a 54% increased risk than those who watched the least. The effects on the uterine cancer were even starker for those who were the most inactive, with a 32% increased risk for women who sat a lot, and 66% for those who watched the most television. Watching television is bad for you genetically. How bizarre is that? Now, I actually know that when you actually watch the television, you actually get beamed at you, the program that you're watching, but there's also another signal that's being beamed at you. And we're going to have a little look in a minute at the fact that we can be altered by things that are actually come at us in different frequencies, can actually have an effect on us. And the scientists are actually saying that if you watch television, this can really impact your health. It's not just about sitting down, okay, and being inactive. It's the actual thing. There's something coming off that screen that isn't good for you. Whether it be, I don't know, what you're watching is impacting your brain, is it's changing you, or whether it indeed is this signal that's being transmitted. Epigenetic findings like these are offering some clues as to how our lifestyles actually influence processes within our cells that tell problematic genes to activate and start causing problems, and helpful genes to deactivate and stop solving problems. Perhaps just as significant as research suggesting that epigenetic traits brought on by our diets and lifestyles can actually become heritable. If some of our habits are able to cause changes to be incorporated into our DNA and expressed in successive generations, our children's children, then negative health trends like obesity are an even greater cause for concern. Now, here's an article that says, Grandma's experiences leave a mark on your genes. Your ancestors' lousy childhoods or excellent adventures might change your personality, bequeathing anxiety or resilience by altering the epigenetic expressions of genes in the brain. Quite bizarre, isn't it? Behavioral epigenetics. According to new insights of behavioral epigenetics, traumatic experiences in our past or in our recent ancestors' past leave molecular scars adhering to our DNA. This is nuts, isn't it? Like silt deposited on the cogs of a finely tuned machine after the seawater of a tsunami recedes, our experiences and those of our forebears are never gone, even if they've been forgotten. They become a part of us, a molecular residue holding fast to our genetic scaffolding. The DNA remains the same, but psychological and behavioral tendencies are inherited. You might have inherited not just your grandmother's knobbly knees, but also her predisposition towards depression caused by the neglect that she suffered as a newborn. This is nuts, isn't it? Or not maybe. If your grandmother was adopted by nurturing parents, you might be enjoying the boost she received thanks to their love and support. The mechanisms of behavioral epigenetics underlie not only deficits and weaknesses, but strengths and resiliences too. It's nuts, isn't it? So the behavior of your forebears actually determines who you are. And I've heard it said by one woman who gave a TED talk, she said, if your father was a burglar, you're actually predisposed to becoming a burglar. And it's like traits that are passed on. There's these epigenetic markers that are switching and switching off, things that actually affect your behavior and your personality. Did Jehovah know about epigenetics? The Lord visits, I think this is amazing, this verse now. The Lord visits the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. It's what we've just seen in the science. And it's actually written about in the scriptures. It's absolutely bizarre, isn't it? And while I was doing this, I was looking for pictures of fathers and sons. We have a responsibility. Our behavior actually affects our offspring. And our behavior actually affects us as we are living, breathing, walking around. Affects us genetically now. And as we've seen, watching television isn't a good thing. Look at this for the picture. I think it's great. Lovely, isn't it? Back to the Parsha. That's all very bizarre, isn't it? What we have in these scriptures is Jacob, who is a known deceiver, putting something in front of the eyes of his flocks that ultimately has an effect on them and their offspring psychologically and genetically. Science seems to be telling us that what we put in front of our eyes does affect us. This episode with Jacob brings it to our attention and makes me question the spiritual nature of what is going on. So what if Jacob represents the ultimate deceiver, Hasatan? Just to have it as a picture. Is Hasatan involved in a scheme to get us and our offspring spotted and striped? Does he put things before our eyes that are having a very negative effect on us in order to corrupt our DNA and thus spiritually impair us, which takes us back to what I was saying before. How many strands are we supposed to have? We've got 2, and apparently we've got 10 hidden strands. Is this, because you're seeing something here. We're seeing it in science that actually what is before us is affecting us genetically. Spotted and striped, bearing in mind that Yeshua is coming back for a bride, and it says this in Ephesians 5, that he, Yeshua, might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Check that out, that she might be holy and without blemish. And this is all done by the washing of the water of the word. We are constantly under attack visually. Magazines, even foreign ones. We don't see many of them knocking out, do we? And the television, even walking down the road, everywhere. Brain chemicals and porn addiction. This is nuts. Science shows how porn harms us. And there's a study been done, which I won't go into the whole thing of it, but what we actually watch affects us. It changes the chemicals in the brain. It actually changes, the pathways are set up in your brain, and it actually alters you. It's beyond belief, isn't it? But people have no idea. But obviously, the enemy knows these things. Is the enemy, this deceiver, is he putting things in our path to actually cause us to change, to not be the spotless bride? What we view can harm us. It says in Psalm 101, I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. In Psalm 101, in the King James, it says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. What do you set before your eyes? And what effect is it having on you? And I come back to this meme. This is Yeshua. This is just a meme, obviously. In the last days of earth, people will say they follow me, but will accept magic, lust, murder, rape, violence, and all manner of sins as entertainment. And that's exactly what's going on today. People go to church, then they go home and they switch the box on and they go, oh, I love this. Harry Potter, or whatever it is. Oh, it's my favourite soap. And they're all profaning and talking drivel and nonsense. And the Lord's going like, and all the people around them at the time are going, don't be stupid. But it's actually happening in our day. Box sets, I've heard people talk about these things like they're, very enlightening and wonderful things, but are these things the tricks of the enemy to actually mark us and to degrade us in some way? It also makes sense of the stock that occultics put in symbols. These things that they put before our eyes everywhere. Do they know that they have an effect on us? Numbers 15:37, it just reminds me of this scripture about the tzitzit. And he said, speak to the people of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations. To put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner, and it shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of Jehovah to do them, and not to follow after your own heart and your own eyes, which are inclined to whore after. So you shall remember to do all my commandments and be holy to your God. To be holy, to be set apart for your God. We're to look at these things, because the Lord knows we are affected by the things that we see. And he's saying, when all that nonsense is going on, look at these things and remember, keep my commandments. I think the enemy has been attacking us in many ways. He tries to alter our state through music. Plato said, when the mode of the music changes, the walls of the city shake. I honestly believe we are under attack. It's not just the genetically modified food. It's not just the drivel that's put before our eyes constantly, but the music. And this is something that's interested me of late. There's this idea that music shouldn't be tuned the way it's tuned. I've got a tuner for my guitar, and it tunes my A note in at 440 hertz. Okay? Now, there's a lot of reasons for suggesting that it should be altered to 432. It's a lower tone. Okay? If you want to find, this is for an article, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla said that. Vibration and frequencies affect us. They just do. It's a known fact that everything, including our own bodies, is made up of energy vibrating at different frequencies. That being said, can sound frequencies affect us? They sure can. Frequencies affect frequencies, much like mixing ingredients with other ingredients affects the overall flavor of a meal. The way frequencies affect the physical world has been demonstrated through various experiments, such as the science of cymatics and water memory. This is cymatics, where they play a note and you get these crazy shapes that appear on plates. If you put sand on a plate and play a musical note through it, these shapes occur. This is the effect of different types of music on water molecules. Here you've got I will kill you. That's what happens to the water molecule. It completely degrades. There's Fujiwara's water molecules before prayer, and there's it after prayer. This is science. This is proved. We are actually affected. Bear in mind, with something soft like 70 or 80% water as well. This is a molecule of water which has been played heavy metal music. It actually destroys us. It's bizarre, isn't it? Most music worldwide has been tuned to for 440 hertz since the International Standards Organization promoted it in '53, all ready for rock and roll to come in. And I believe that the Rockefeller Foundation had a lot to do with this, because I believe they actually know about this stuff. And I met a Freemason the other day who actually said to me, oh yeah, and the note's F sharp, isn't it? Now, having studied this a bit more and knowing where the frequency he's on about comes in, They do know, the occultists do know about this stuff. However, studies regarding the vibratory nature of the universe indicate that this pitch is disharmonious with the natural resonance of nature and may generate negative effects on human behavior and consciousness. Certain theories even suggest that the Nazi regime has been in favor of adopting this pitch as standard after conducting scientific researches to determine which range of frequencies best induce fear and aggression. Whether or not the conspiracy is factual, I very much doubt it. Interesting studies and observations have pointed towards the benefits of tuning music to 432 hertz instead. That's irrefutable. Where it came from, don't worry about that, but that's irrefutable. And it does, apparently, it generates behavioural effects on us. The music we listen to every day is tuned just off skew to actually be disharmonious with the frequencies of our body. Here's water which has been played at 432. This is it at 440. You can see that there's a big difference. 432 hertz is said to be mathematically consistent with the patterns of the universe. Studies reveal that 432 hertz tuning vibrates with the universe's golden mean and unifies the properties of light, time, space, matter, gravity, and magnetism with biology, the DNA code, and consciousness. When our atoms and DNA start to resonate in harmony with the spiral and pattern of nature, our sense of connection to nature is said to be magnified. All sounds a bit new age and all that, doesn't it? But this is actually science, and it is actually true. Now, the author of the article that I've just quoted from, he says this: I personally have enjoyed many bands, artists and styles of music, even though they were in the tuning of 440 hertz. However, by comparing a few songs in both 432 and 440, I can feel and hear the difference. I wouldn't say that my experience of 440 music has turned me into an aggressive person, but I can understand how an entire population being exposed to music that is more mind-directed as opposed to heart-directed, not to mention all of the materialistic and ego-driven lyrics in most popular music, is a perfect combination to maintain a more discordant frequency and state of consciousness within humanity. I believe we're actually being attacked through the music, through the television. We've seen all these things have an effect on us, what we put before our eyes. That's why the psalmist says, I will put no unholy thing before my eyes. That's why the Lord says, when you see all these things, just take a look, wear these and look down at these. He knows more than we know, and he's telling us to do this for a reason. And it was to be holy and set apart. We know we have an enemy and his goal is to destroy, and I think it's interesting to start to realize, and that when Jehovah says he wants us to be a holy people, we can start to understand why we need to be set apart. John 10:10 says this: the thief comes not but to steal, to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. Hebrews 12:14, because you do, when you follow the Lord, it means life. All these things that we're talking about are a negative effect upon us. They degrade us in some way. Hebrews 12:14 says, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. What is holiness? Holiness means being set apart. All these things that are affecting us in this negative way, the Lord knows about it, and he says, be set apart, be different than the world. This stuff will destroy it. Remember, how many strands? The question is, how many strands the human beings are supposed to have? And Marco Torres says 12. Have we been degraded in such a way? But we're supposed to be in communion with the creator of all things. And it just makes these verses seem a little bit more important. Romans 12:2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, whereas I still think that this scripture is probably still referring to changing your mindset from a Greek to a Hebraic worldview, it does make you wonder about this whole transformed business. And I mean, are we actually transformed literally on a genetic level here? 1 Corinthians 15:52 says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Will we be changed back to having 12 strands of DNA? I don't know. This ladder, which Yeshua said he is, he's the restorer of all things. Is this what it's on about? But please, whatever this is talking about, we're learning more and more, and we've got no excuse for not realizing now that the things that we watch, the things that we listen to, have a massive effect on us. The Lord knew what he was talking about when he wrote his word. He knows more than we will ever know. To follow his teaching and instruction makes so much sense. And the more we find out in science, the more we just have to bow the knee and say, Lord, wow, you're incredible. Now, chapter 31 is about Jacob fleeing. Or in other words, when Yeshua restores the kingdom and Ephraim and Judah are one body made up of all 12 tribes, the 2 joined with the 10, that talks about restoration. But maybe it's not just a picture of the tribes coming together. Maybe it's a picture of us being transformed. And these 10 strands of DNA that are missing, maybe it's a picture of that coming back together. So this is when we will be whole again and fully communing with our Creator. Now, interestingly, the ancient rabbis refer to this ladder as a tree. And also the 2 sticks in Ezekiel 37, the stick of the house of Judah and the stick of the house of Ephraim, they're also 2 trees becoming one tree. So it interests me to think that as we become more spiritually aware, we are actually genetically altered. And I'll be looking at it in a little bit later in the parsha, the fact that actually our behavior affects us genetically. So this isn't just, and this is science, this isn't just crazy thinking, oh, what if? This is actual science. Our behavior and what we do actually changes us genetically. So if we are actually in communion with the Creator of all things and His Spirit lives in us, it's not beyond our comprehension to think that somehow we are genetically being altered. If our behavior is proven to be altered by our genes affected by our behavior, then this is not just science fiction craziness. So, as we become more spiritually aware, we are actually genetically altered. All this in a world where we are bombarded with genetically modified food that is actually designed to alter us at the genetic level. A world where potentially the things we are subjected to via the media on a daily basis quite possibly is also having a degenerative effect on us. More on that later. There's actually studies that prove that your chances of becoming ill are affected by how much television you watch on a genetic level. It's just completely bizarre. So, as we know, the effects of genetically modified food physically alter the genetics of animals. You can see a normal fed, Monsanto GMO fed. Laboratory tests by the Russian National Academy of Sciences reported that more than half the babies from mother rats fed GM soy died within 3 weeks. The babies in the GM group were also smaller and could not reproduce. Rats fed a commercial rat chow using GM soy within 2 months had infant mortality facility-wide reaching 55%. We're being altered. But what I'm trying to put across here is all this interest in this Jacob's ladder thing from all the occultic world. It's like they kind of have got onto this thing. They're understanding that there's something more about this. And that's hence why we are actually being bombarded and attacked on a genetic level, even by the very food that we eat. So verse 13 says, "And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken of thee." So please understand, these are the very first words from the mouth of the Almighty that Yaakov has ever heard. And the message is clear. There is a God, Jacob, but there is only one God. Jehovah wanted Jacob to know before he arrived in the land of Haran, where foreign gods were worshipped and foreign ways were the norm. What he wants him to know is that God is not different things to different people. Why do you think we've got 47, whatever it is, different denominations of Christianity? God is not different things to different people. He is who he says he is. He identifies who he is. We don't get to choose who he is. He lays it out for us in his word. He wanted him to know that the God whom Abraham knew and served is the same God who Yaakov's father Yitzhak knew and served. And he wanted Yaakov to know that the God whom Yaakov's father Yitzhak knew and served is the same God that he, beginning this very night, was going to know and serve. Is that the God that we serve? Because it's the only one we're serving, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. He's not different things to different people. You can't make up your own woolly, lovely, oh, look at him, he's got blue eyes and he says everything's cool and all you've got to do is say a little prayer and put your hand up. You can't make up your own. He's not different things to different people. He's not to this bunch of people in society, he's not saying that's perfectly acceptable, and to another bunch of people saying, oh, it's naughty, but yeah. But people have this idea that God just bends and he's willy-nilly and he's woolly, like he's some old man in the sky who's just quite good-hearted, really. He used to be a bit nasty, but now he's lovely. That's not who he is. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if you want to know who he is, it's all there for you in the Word. Stick to the Word. The one true God is the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, and this is the same God who chose Abraham for the following reasons. It tells us in Genesis 26:5, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. This is the same God that we're dealing with today. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He chose Abraham because he obeyed his voice. If you read all the way through the scriptures, it's the same message. Even Yeshua said, he who hears my words and does them, he's like a sensible, wise man who builds his house on a rock. And then he says, but if you don't hear my words, it's like you've built it on sand, and the ruin that's going to come is going to be such a great calamity. It's the same message. Please note that Jehovah does not change and his righteousness is everlasting. You can pick a God to worship who is not interested in whether you walk righteously, but you will not be in covenant with the one whose words are life. 1 John 3:7-10. Little children, let no man deceive you. He that doeth righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinneth from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Sin is the transgression of the Torah. Whosoever is born of God, do not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. That means that doesn't mean you'll never faff up. It means that you are not predisposed to go around breaking God's Torah because it sits wrong with you, because his spirit lives within you. In this, the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of God. That's the end of it. And what is righteousness? It's doing divine law. It's following his Torah, his teaching as an instruction. And neither is he that doesn't love his brother. Malachi 2:17, you have wearied the Lord with your words, yet ye say, wherein have we wearied him? When you say, everyone that doeth evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delighteth in them. Or where is the God of judgment? So this whole idea of, it's all right, God loves everyone, it's cool. I know you're spinning and living a sinful life and it's not good, but, Jesus has done it all and actually he thinks you're great and he loves you and all this. It's actually saying here, where have you wearied him? When you say, everyone that doeth evil is good in the sight of the Lord and he delights in him. Oh, it's okay, God loves you anyway. Hang on a minute. Whosoever do not righteousness is not of God. Do not be deceived. It says it all the way through the scriptures. Do not be deceived by these people who come and lick your ears with these words dripping with honey that are actually, when you ingest them, just poison to your system and bring death. What Jehovah has just done, you see, was to renew with Yaakov the covenant he made with Abraham in Genesis 15 and 17. Yaakov has just been divinely empowered for the process of succeeding his father and his grandfather as Jehovah's weaker covenant partner. Now, there are 4 basic elements to the covenant of Jehovah with and for the benefit of mankind through adopting Abraham as a vassal. God would give Abraham fantastically numerous descendants. God would give the vassal Abraham's descendants the land of Canaan, this is Israel, as a perpetual possession. The vassal was to teach his children and his household after him to follow the ways of the Holy One and to do righteousness and justice. And the vassal was to circumcise every male child born in his household on the 8th day of the child's life. So these are the 4 points. But to Jacob, there is absolutely no mention of teaching his kids and there's no mention of circumcision because he has no frame of reference for such things. All he can handle at this point, bear in mind, this is the first time it's all become real to him. At this point, all he can manage to know is that he's grafted into his father and his grandfather's heritage. The rest will come in due time. For with this initial God encounter, Yaakov's life begins to change, but it doesn't happen overnight. This whole parsha is about him going through a process of being completely transformed. And this is kind of the beginning of it. This is his realization. Wow. The God of my fathers is real and he's in covenant with me. This is actually really happening. Note that his descendants will be so numerous that their numbers are compared to the dust of the earth. This is a weird one, isn't it? The word used for dust also translates as ashes, dirt, or rubbish. So he's been told, your descendants will be like the rubbish of the earth. But if you compare that with Genesis 22, the Torah uses other similes to describe the many descendants of the patriarchs. In 22:17 it says, blessing, I will bless you, and I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore. But to Jacob, it's just like the rubbish of the earth. He must have been like, oh, okay. Now Jacob awakened out of his sleep and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. Now, bear this in mind, Yeshua links himself with the ladder that we were on about. Do you remember we were talking about this ladder? Well, in his conversation with Nathanael, he says this. Yeshua answered and said unto him, because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? This is the first time Nathanael's met Yeshua, and he's freaked out that Yeshua knows stuff about him. Thou shalt see greater things than these, says Yeshua to him. And he saith unto him, verily, verily. So that means very important now. Listen up. I say unto you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. I thought they were ascending up and down on this staircase, this stairway. But he says it will happen on the Son of Man. The dream of the ladder with angels ascending and descending is a picture of Jehovah establishing a line of communication between heaven and earth. So this connection that we have, Yeshua is saying, well, this is all talking about me. They'll all know the story, and they'll all be going, what, the ladder? And he's saying, you will see them descending upon the Son of Man. Yeshua is the one who actually brings restoration. He's the one who restores the 2 kingdoms of the house of Judah with the 10 kingdoms from the north. He's the one, I believe, who will restore us as well. Genesis 28:14 speaks of Jacob's descendants being spread to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. His descendants will be spread throughout the earth during times of exile. And Jehovah follows up in verse 15, however, with a promise to bring his descendants back to the land. And we've got this in Isaiah 11:12. He will set up a banner for the nations, and he will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. This is the promise that he will do that very thing. He will take the 2 and he will take the 10 and he will bring them back together. And the more we watch and we see the news unfold, and the more we see the way the scriptures are opening up to us, the more we can actually see this all starting to take shape, all being prepared, the ground prepared for this to actually happen. Yeshua sent his disciples out to the ends of the earth, remember, in order to prepare for this restoration back to the land. In Acts 1:6-8. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Adonai, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? He said to them, it is not for you to know the times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. So if the ladder was incomplete, it is Yeshua who will make it complete. Yeshua who will restore the kingdom, bring the 10 lost tribes of the lost sheep of the house of Israel together with the 2 tribes of the house of Judah. So we can actually look forward to being the 12-strand DNA people in full communion with Jehovah our Creator and operating in all the gifts of the Ruach. If we can call ourselves children of Abraham, that is. Okay, and in John 8:39, are you a child of Abraham? This is what happened in John 8:39. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. And Yeshua said unto them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. Now we looked before, didn't we? We saw why Abraham was chosen, because he obeyed the voice of Jehovah. So it is Yeshua who makes all things whole and complete. And I just think this whole thing about this ladder is absolutely quite fantastic, and I can see why all this interest comes from the occult world, and why queens of England waving with their funny gloves on, or sitting on this stone that they think's the pillar of destiny, and why world leaders are all gathered round while this stone gets laid in New York. Quite bizarre. Verse 17, and he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Yaakov rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. So why does Jacob take the stone he rested his head on, set it up as a pillar and pour oil on it, and call the site of the house of El? The word for the stone is Ha'aben, which is Aleph Beit Nun, which is the leader of the house brings life, because each letter's got a pictographic meaning. And then we've got the sum. It's almost the same, isn't it? It's haben. Because haben and haben are so similar in interpretation, sometimes they would put a hey in there and sometimes they would put an aleph. So the sun and the stone or the rock are interchangeable. So when you read in loads of the scriptures and it says the stone that the builders rejected and stuff, the word for stone and the word for sun are interchangeable in the Hebrew. And the stone means the leader of the house brings life. So that's a great picture for us as well, isn't it? Now a king had to be anointed at the gates of the temple. The place where Jacob was where the temple would ultimately be built. He even calls the place the house of God. He couldn't have known, could he? Can you imagine it? He wakes up in the morning. He probably doesn't know the stones that he's rested his head on are probably the same stones where Abraham brought Isaac up to sacrifice him. He gets up in the morning, he must be thinking, that was just bizarre. That was weird. And little does he know, he sets this pillar up, pours oil on it. This is the site of the temple. He has no idea, does he? I sometimes wonder in our lives, we do things and we have no idea, do we? We have no idea of the significance of actions that we do. No idea. I was saying to JP the other day, sometimes just the smallest gesture or just a word of kindness or just these little things can be really significant to people. We have such an ability to affect people's lives in a positive or negative way. We just don't see the significance of what we're doing sometimes. And we can bring the kingdom of heaven to the kingdom of earth when we represent our God faithfully. Psalm 118 verse 22 talks about this. The stone which the builders refused has become the headstone of the corner. A house, certainly they rejected it. This is talking about the sun, the stone. Ephesians 2:19. Now therefore you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yeshua the Messiah himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom the whole building being joined together grows into a holy temple in Adonai. We are living stones, remember, built into the temple of Jehovah, and Yeshua is the cornerstone. Without him there is no temple. 1 Peter 2:7-8. Unto you therefore which believe he is precious, but unto them which be disobedient, the stone, the sun, which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner. And it's a stone of stumbling and a rock of offence, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. This is fascinating to me. Is a stone of stumbling. The sun is a stone of stumbling, a rock of offence to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient. Now this is nuts to me, because I actually believe to certain people who like all this daily grace inspirations and all that, the actual Son of God, the actual Yeshua, is actually a son of offence to them, because they just want to go along with their disobedience. If they actually meant the true Messiah, they would be like that, and they would reject him. He would be a stone of stumbling for them, because these are the people who stumble at his word and are disobedient in their hearts. Isaiah 28:16. Therefore thus saith Jehovah God, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone. This is Yeshua's, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth shall not make haste. Romans 9:33. It is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and a rock of offence. This is lovely. And whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Wow. Build your house on the rock. This is what I mentioned before. Therefore, this is Yeshua speaking, by the way, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which builds his house upon a rock. The rain descended and the floods came and the winds blew. Now this is a description of the end time events. This is a description of the fact the world's going to get absolutely ridiculously messed up. This is a description of the events that went on last night in Paris. This is a description of the events that are still worse to come and are going to happen throughout the whole world. But the Lord's telling us this: if you hear the sayings of mine and do them, you've built your house on a rock, and when all this nonsense comes and the floods and the winds blew and beat upon the house, it fell not, for it was founded on the rock. What rock are we talking about? Him. The real him that's written in the word, not this phony spoofy, he loves everybody, not this nonsensical vain imagination. But then it says, everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and does not do them shall be likened to a foolish man which built his house on the sand. And it talks again of all the trouble that's come, and the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon the house. Their house fell. And it says here, and great was the fall of it. It's going to be such a calamity. And we read in Proverbs 1, it says, I will laugh at your calamity because you didn't hearken to my voice. We must hearken to his voice. Somebody said to me last night in a text, do you think it's the end times? What do we need to do? It's simple. What we need to do is, we're in the end times. Everything's marching to this point in history. The thing that we have to do is be the wise people who hear what he has to say and do what he says. That's what we have to do. And he called the name of that place Bethel, back to the Parsha. But the name of the city was called Luz at the first. And Jacob vowed a vow saying, he's put an if in as he, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the tenth unto thee. So there is like it's another thing of somebody giving a tithe, a tenth of all they have. This word if, let's have a look at that. The Hebrew word for if, which is im, this little word has a variety of meanings and is occasionally translated as when. If we exchange the if for a when in verse 20, then we understand that Jacob is simply stating that when the Almighty fulfills his promises, then he will be in a position to build this house of God. He understands the importance of waiting for Jehovah's promises, and so should we. It wasn't I don't believe it was an if you do this, Lord, and if you do that for me. I think he was actually, because I think he'd actually at this point received the gift of faith to be able to say, when you do all this, Lord. Now, like Yaakov, we think we are determining our own destiny. But like Yaakov, we are wrong. We are being led on this journey by an invisible divine hand. I was speaking to my dad last night because he mentioned all this stuff that was going on. And I was trying to explain to him the picture of history and the picture of what was going on today. And I was relating it to the scriptures. And it dawned on me. I actually started to shake as I was speaking. Because I was explaining to him, he said, how come you know all this? And I actually explained to him how it happened, that somebody came up to me and asked me a question, which led to me doing some research. And then once I'd done all the research, the Lord put it on somebody's heart to come over, JP knows the guy, to come over and sit and speak to me and talk to me. And he said, I don't know why I came over, but I just did. And he came and he sat, and I got to sit and speak to this man for 2 hours, and it completely transformed his life. This is like an old 70-year-old man whose life has been built on lies, and to be able to completely expunge that was just bizarre. And it was nuts the way I realized the Lord actually punctuated this journey that I've been on all the way. We think we're in charge. We're not in charge. He's in charge, and I thank him for that. When I was in charge, it was bad. Things are changing around us so rapidly, it's hard to keep up with it all. Doors are closing behind us, but other doors are opening in front of us. Relationships we once cherished are phasing out behind us, but other relationships are simultaneously beckoning us to go forth from the foreground. Okay, Yaakov is a son of the covenant, and that means that he's never forsaken, never abandoned, and never alone. There are divine watchers all around him wherever he goes. That's the same for us. Better than these fellas. Much better. Do you know who this is, JP? I don't. Rapper Drake takes cover. I've never heard of him. I'm just so out of touch. I don't know. Now Psalm 121, 4-8 says this, behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Jehovah is your keeper. Jehovah is your shade at your right hand. So when all this trouble's going on, just remember these scriptures. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Jehovah will preserve you from all evil. He will preserve your soul. Jehovah will preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. In from Laban. It says, and he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. He had a bit of a face on, see, like that fella. Now, a dreamline image of someone enthroned atop a stairway manned by angels is one thing, but hearing the actual voice that created the universe speaking in real time is something else altogether. Dreams, by the way, are considered the lowest realm of revelation, but here, 20 years on, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father has deceived me, and he's changed my wages 10 times. He's starting to twig it, but God suffered him not to hurt me. He's changed, hasn't he? Can you see that? He recognizes the Lord working in his life. If he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straight. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at that time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring straight, speckled and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. Then he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring straight, speckled and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the Lord God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do it. And Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives on the camels. And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, to go forward to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. I think it's interesting. He wanted to leave a lot earlier. He wanted to leave 6 years earlier, but he had nothing. But now the Lord has actually blessed him, and he's actually in a good, wealthy position. And now the Lord actually says, now I want you to go. There's this a pattern that's being set up as well. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were their father's. That was a stupid thing to do, and has massive repercussions, which I can't fully go into in the time that we've got. Rachel has done something here that absolutely guarantees that Laban will come after them in hot pursuit, much like Pharaoh will do with regard to Jacob and his descendants a few centuries later. It's kind of like the same story. It's nuts the way I've noticed in the scripture. It really is. It's the same story repeated. But just as Jehovah was with Moshe in the mixed multitude, so he's with Yaakov. Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. And he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. We have no idea, do we, what some of the things that are going on while we're busy about our business? We just have no idea. The Lord's looking after him, and he's not even aware of it. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me, and didst not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth, with songs, with tabrets, and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. So what does he do? He clothes himself in self-righteous indignation. Laban took up an offended heir and a victim's rage, and accused Yaakov of not leaving under proper terms. The Labans of this world, you see, are takers. They're experts at making themselves appear as victims by twisting the facts and laying guilt trips on people. Laban was actually a highly skilled manipulator. But Yaakov has matured. He's finally learned that he did not need Laban's permission. He even realized that he did not need Laban's blessing. Why did Jacob not need these things? Because he had a covenant with Jehovah, and Jehovah, his covenant partner, had said that he should go. That's why he was able to go. That's why he went. So, that is all any of us needs, isn't it? If the Lord says go, then we should go. Don't let people, manipulators, with guilt trips which they spin your way, fool you or hold you back from your destiny. I just put here, some people are about as subtle as this. Others might be more scheming. Laban was tricky, and he tried to lay guilt trips on Jacob, tried to make out, come on, we work well together, this is great, this is, But the Lord had said to Jacob, no, go. You've got a destiny and it doesn't lie here. Laban just really didn't want to let him go. He's a snidey character, as we've seen all the way through the scriptures. He's a deceiver. He's only in it for what he can get for himself. It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. This is Laban speaking now. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight. JP, when I was doing this, he said, you get to say yes tonight, don't you? I've just said it. There you go. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob, either good or bad. Now, Genesis 28:15. I want us just, like we said before, trouble is coming and all this nonsense is coming upon the earth and all this craziness. Genesis 28:15. This is what he said. This is what the Lord had said to Jacob earlier. He said, behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Every prophetic word or promise must be tested, and it's being tested now for Jacob. What he's basically got, it's difficult for us to read it and actually fully appreciate. Laban, this schemer, this manipulator, has turned up with a horde of people. You think about it, Jacob, over the period of 6 years, has basically took all the wealth from Laban and made it his own. He's not popular. He's really not popular either with Laban or with any of the people associated with Laban, and they've turned up basically furious. How dare he? He's just gone off in the middle of the night. And the Lord has actually spoken to Laban and said, hang on a minute, don't you dare even think about even speaking to him, good or bad. We've no idea. We just go through our lives. Jacob didn't know that the Lord had come and done this until Laban spoke it to him. We've no idea that as we're going about our business, the things that the Lord is doing, where he's holding people back and shutting people's mouths to protect us and to just guide us. As we said earlier, we think we're in charge of our own destiny, but we're not. When he is our covenant partner, our stronger covenant partner, and we bow the knee, we're in his hands and it's him who guides us. And that's something that is so reassuring to me, to know that he is in charge. That's just so much better. And I don't have to worry about these scheming, manipulating people who try to paint their idea of a lifestyle as being the best idea, who try to trick me and rob me out of my destiny. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about the things they say. All I have to worry about is listening to the words of the Lord God Almighty and doing what it is that he says. The men in Laban's mob have the ability and the desire and to do Yaakov physical harm. Yaakov's life and destiny and the lives and destinies of those he loves most in the world truly hang in the balance. And I put a picture up here of what a mob actually looks like. And I saw some other pictures while I was looking for this picture of what mobs actually look like. And I saw some images that I wished I hadn't seen. Mobs are not pretty things. This poor man's just about to be burnt alive. I think they called it neck tying. They put a tire on you and burn you. And this goes on all over the world. So when it says this mob turned up, this was a real thing. This was a really frightening experience. But the Lord was with him. So remember that when you read these scriptures, they're real. Like we saw him before, he got angry and it was real. It was real and the Lord protected him. And when it gets real for us, we must remember that the Lord will protect us too. Bill Bullock Sr. says, Laban did that which a deceiver bent on genocide always does. Now, Bill Bullock Sr. didn't relate it to Zionism and what's going on. By the way, I've put that up to show that I'm not anti-Semitic. But this is what Laban says a deceiver bent on genocide always does. Posturing oneself and one's culture as the victim instead of the persecutor, which is exactly what Israel does. Laban begins his assault on the covenant family by shamelessly rewriting history to his advantage. Employing emotionally charged exaggerations, he will paint himself and his sons as a helpless, innocent victims. And we will do a study on what's actually happening in Israel, and that actually is really quite apt. Verse 30 says, and now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou so longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure would thou take us by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live, before our brethren, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. He has no idea that this wife that he loves, his most favoured wife, has stolen the very things that Laban's talking about here. And he says, whoever's got him, let him die. And them words that he will speak will have repercussions that will go right the way through the Torah, and will actually not, this whole event will actually not be concluded until the end of the book of Numbers. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them, and Laban searched all the tent, but he found them not. And I've just written here, there will be massive repercussions that will begin by resulting in Rachel's premature death and Jacob seemingly losing his two sons by it. Just to give you an idea of how the stories link up, she was basically menstruating and she's put them underneath a saddle. Okay, so what's actually happening there? If they'd have gone looking for these gods, all they would have found is a bloody cloth, which is exactly what was presented when Jacob thought Joseph was dead. When he says this, whoever's got these gods, let them die. Rachel ends up prematurely dead. What happens is then Joseph, he thinks, is dead. The similarities between the stories are incredible. Then he thinks Benjamin is dead, the other son by Rachel, and it doesn't actually get, this whole thing doesn't actually play out to its full conclusion, as I say, till the end of the book of Numbers. If you want to understand Laban's pathetic search for his idols, all you have to do is look at our society. Just think what he's looking for and going frantic about, by the way, these little wooden stupid objects he's going all making a big fuss about. But it's just like our society. Many things our society obsesses over, things like Oscars, Emmys, Grammys, Dove Awards, Olympic medals, World Series rings, World Cup, Davis Cup, America's Cup, Super Bowl, platinum CDs or DVDs, Green Masters jackets, just to name a few, are no less useless than Laban's gods. And yet, like Laban, most people spend their energy and their lives searching for them. And of course, they end up finding nothing. The worthless things anyway, they're completely worthless. Verse 35, and she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. As I said before, she was menstruating. And he searched, but found not the images. And Jacob was wroth, and he chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Where hast thou searched all my stuff? Where hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and thy rams out of thy flock have I not eaten. This, incidentally, is all extremely similar language to the language that's used in the account of when Joseph, the story of Joseph and his brothers in Egypt. That which was torn of beasts, as we know, that's what they said had happened to Joseph. He got torn of the animals. I brought not unto thee. I bear not the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. He is really angry. Okay? But as he recalls all that, he has gone on, all that's gone on, he firmly comes to an important realization. He's accounting, and he's going over these 20 years, and a realization dawns on him. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the God and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen my affliction and the labour of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Get to say it again. But can you see what's happened? When he first turns up, what does he do? He doesn't like the servants. He doesn't pray. Oh Lord, help me find a wife. What does he do? He gets the big stone, tries to play macho man, tries to wrestle the big stone off, then goes up and just grabs her stupidly and kisses her. Freaks her out probably. When he realizes, oh, these are the people I've been looking for, he doesn't like the servants. Get on his knees and bow his head and worship. Doesn't do any of them things. But towards the end of his experience, as he recounts all the things that he's been through, his language has changed, his understanding has changed. He realizes that it's God who's been with him. It's God who's made him, who's blessed him, who's made him fruitful, who's given him this wealth. He's changed. He's a changed person. It's happened over a long period of time, but he's a changed man. Yaakov, just like us, he's loved beyond his comprehension. He's treasured and he's protected beyond the power of any man or force of creation to do him harm. And he's starting to realize that. Wow, and we should realize it ourselves. We're loved beyond our comprehension. That's something that we should actually sit and meditate on and dwell on. The Lord loves us beyond our wildest dreams. It's an incredible thing, isn't it? The creator of the whole universe dotes on us. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? Now therefore come now, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone, and he set it up for a pillar. He's doing the same thing again, isn't it? And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones, and they made an heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it, he would call it something mad, wouldn't he? That's dead hard to pronounce. He called it Jegar-sah-hudu-hudu, and Jacob called it Galeed. Okay, now Galeed is from stone and witness, and this is where the name Gilead comes from. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it Galeed. And Mitzpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee, when we are absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. So they've come to some agreement here. Okay, they're obviously not the best of friends, but they've kind of like glossed it over. And then 53, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. And the Lord does judge between them. And it happens in Numbers, I think it's Numbers 32 or 33. Now, Jacob thus agrees to a mutual non-aggression pact with Jacob. Laban will bother Yaakov no more, but his name will form the root of the name of the area where this covenant was cut. We know that area today as Lebanon, which is the place of Laban. And this bit here, Jehovah judge between us. Here they are, they've built this big thing, the big pontificating thing. And the matter of Gilead is not to be settled unto the Torah portion, Masai. And when you actually see how it's settled, and you see that this story runs all the way through Joseph going into Egypt, Benjamin getting taken, and when they come back into the promised land, and you see, wow, this is insane. The story just completes itself in Numbers 32. It's absolutely incredible. There's a guy called Rabbi Foreman who does, in 2014, he does a parsha for Matot and Messiah, and if you actually watch them two, you get a chance to, you'll see what I mean. Verse 54, then Yaakov offered sacrifice unto the mount and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. So, we're nearly at an end now. Yaakov is no longer the same man who ran away from Esau and from Laban. Our parsha began with a departure from Beersheba, and it ends up with one from Galeed. These physical departures are the bookends, and the most significant departures are spiritual. Okay, because Yaakov has departed from trickery and from heel grabbing and from self-will. He's departed from self-reliance, from prayerlessness, and he's departed from self-importance and from ingratitude. Now, these are big deals, aren't they? this is, like we said at the very beginning, the Lord refines us. He brings all the things that are wrong in us, he brings them to the surface. He purifies us. This whole adventure that Jacob's been on, this 20 years of toil, has all been to get him to the place he needs to be where the Lord wants him so he can fulfill his destiny. Who knows how Jehovah will deal with the rubbish that is in us, right? We should be grateful though that he is willing, and he is. The sooner we stop relying on our own strength, on our own plans, or those of people who profess to love us and have our best interests at heart, and instead learn to trust in Jehovah, the sooner we will be ready for the journey back to the promised land. The sooner we will be able to escape the wiles of men like Lavan, the takers who feign friendship but are only interested in themselves, men that chase after worthless idols, men that have no idea of a greater calling, men that would try to hinder us in our own journey. We need to read this and realize, wow, this is the lengths to which the Lord God Almighty went to in this man's life to bring him to the point where he could say goodbye to all them things in his life. What is it in us that the Lord needs to work out yet? How will he do it? We do not know, do we? The parsha ends like this. Jacob went on his way and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Machanaim. And Yaakov sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Okay, that's like it's a bit of a next time. Because just when he's just got rid of Laban, he's got to go back and meet his brother who he deceived in the first place. So he's not really got much time to sit back, has he, and kick up his heels and go, oh, thank goodness that's all over. Because he's now into the next bit of his journey. Well, let's pray.